This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated's blog, Zalma on Insurance. Today we're going to speak about investigation of first-party property claims and the need of the insurer to determine whether property damage occurred. A first-party property policy does not insure property. It insures a person, a partnership, a corporation, or other entity against the risk of loss of the property. Before an insured could make a claim for indemnity under a policy of first-party property insurance, the insured must prove that there was damage to property, the risk of loss of which was insured by the policy. The obligation imposed on the insured by the policy is often relatively easy to fulfill. For example, in the case of a fire, the charred building need only be shown to the insurer. Other situations may not be as easy to prove. Is a building overhanging a newly created cliff damaged? Has a church that is permeated with gasoline odor sustained property damage? Was missing property stolen? Has the building showing signs it may collapse subject to an insured peril called collapse? Often an insurer needs the wisdom of Solomon to reach a correct and fair result. The first-party property adjuster is charged with the duty of helping the insured establish the existence or non-existence of property damage due to a risk of loss insured against and not excluded, and work to keep all of the promises made by the insurance policy. When a first-party property policy insures against the risk of physical loss to certain real or personal property, whether the policy is a named peril, all risk, special risk, or direct risk of physical loss policy, the insured must first prove there is damage to the property. An insured may also make claim for loss of use of the property that is the subject of the insurance. The insured can retain the property and sustain a constructive loss of use by denial of access or damage to or of imminent destruction. For example, in Hughes v. Potomac Insurance Company, a 1962 decision of the California Court of Appeal, the court found coverage after the land next to the house slid away, causing the undamaged house to overhang a cliff. The California Court of Appeal found that damage to the structure existed if it was not a safe place for people to live, even though all the walls stood and the roof kept out the rain. While a loss of use may in some cases entail a physical loss of use and physical loss or damage are not synonymous. Indeed, interpretation of physical loss as requiring only loss of use stretches physical beyond its ordinary meaning and may in some cases render the word physical meaningless. For example, in Source Food Tech v. U.S. Fidelity and Guarantee, a 2006 decision of the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeal, the court found no coverage under a policy covering direct physical loss to property when property was meat which was not allowed to cross the border into the United States and was thus treated as unusable, but in fact suffered no spoilage or contamination. The COVID-19 pandemic caused serious litigation on the issue of what is physical loss or damage and how a limitation in a policy of insurance defeats attempts to obtain coverage for loss of use of property and interruption of business caused by orders of state authorities. Oral Surgeons P.C. sued its insurers for loss of earnings. Oral Surgeons offered oral and maxillofacial surgery services at its 4 offices in the Des Moines, Iowa area. Oral surgeons stopped performing non-emergency procedures in late March of 2020 after the governor of Iowa declared a state of emergency and imposed restrictions on dental practices because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Oral surgeons resumed procedures in May of 2020 as the restrictions were lifted, adhering to guidance from the Iowa Dental Board. The insurer refused to pay, and oral surgeons sued. The United States Court of Appeal for the Eighth Circuit on July 2, 2021, dealt with the suit, and even with multiple amici filing opinions, the court found the loss of use to its offices was not physical loss, and oral surgeons were not entitled to business interruption benefits. To give the terms separate meanings, or that oral surgeons suggested, defining physical loss to include lost operations or inability to use the business, and defining physical damage as physical alteration to the property, the Court of Appeal just refused to provide the benefits that the oral surgeons sought. The common usage of physical in the context of a loss therefore means the loss of something material or perceptible on some level. The policy cannot reasonably be interpreted to cover mere loss of use when the insurer's property has suffered no physical loss or damage. The Eighth Circuit refused to find loss of use and physical loss or damage synonymous, and concluded rather that they are opposites. The unambiguous requirement that the loss or damage be physical in nature accords with the policy's coverage of lost business income and incurred extra expense from the date the physical damage to the insured's property until the insured restores the damaged property to its use. Since there was no damage, the period of restoration begins at the time of loss and ends at either the date when the property at the premises should be repaired, rebuilt, or replaced with reasonable speed and similar quality, or the date when business is resumed at a new permanent location. Property that has suffered physical loss or physical damage requires restoration. That the policy provides coverage until property should be repaired, rebuilt, or replaced, or until business resumes elsewhere, assumes physical alteration of the property, not mere loss of use. So when the only reason the property was not used was an order of governmental agency is not a physical loss or physical damage. In fact, the property where oral surgeons practiced was unchanged during the entire time they could not provide oral surgery. The complaint pleaded generally that oral surgeons suspended non-emergency procedures due to COVID-19 pandemic and the related government-imposed restrictions. The complaint thus alleged no facts to show that it had suspended activities due to direct accidental physical loss or accidental physical damage, regardless of the precise definitions of the terms loss or damage. Since the policy clearly did not provide coverage for oral surgeons' partial loss of use of its offices, absent a showing of direct physical loss or physical damage where no ambiguity existed, an appellate court will not write a new policy to impose liability on the insurer. There was no question that the orders closing business due to fear of spreading COVID-19 caused damage, a loss of business income to oral surgeons and all other businesses who were forced to close down by order of the state or some entity. That order did not damage the property that was the subject of the insurance, and there was no need to restore it, since once the order was pulled, the business of oral surgeons was able to begin immediately. No insurance policy insures against every possible loss. The loss claimed by oral surgeons was one for which the insurance benefits were unavailable. When a residence contains walls that were constructed using sheets of Chinese drywall that over time released sulfuric gas into a residence, it was found to have incurred property damage, even though the walls remained intact. Other cases have likewise accepted the view that damage includes loss of function or value, including a loss of power to the insured's premises. In ordinary use and widely accepted definitions, physical damage to property means a distinct, demonstrable, and physical alteration of its structure. Physical damage to a building as an entity by sources unnoticeable to the naked eye must meet a higher threshold. For example, the Colorado Supreme Court in Western Fire Insurance versus First Presbyterian Church in 1968 decision of the Colorado Supreme Court concluded that coverage was triggered when authorities ordered a building closed after gasoline fumes seeped into a building structure and made its use unsafe. Although neither the building nor its elements were demonstrably altered, its function as a church was eliminated. This post was adapted from my book, Zelma on Insurance Claims, Part 104, 3rd edition, which is available as a Kindle book, a hardcover, or paperback from Amazon.com. The blog posting is available free to anyone who clicks on the URL zelma.com/blog. You can subscribe to the blog and you will be notified of every blog posting, usually 5 a week, sometimes 6. And you can also subscribe to the videos on rumble.com and youtube.com. And if you found them useful, please click on the like button on YouTube and the Rumble button on rumble.com. And if this really was useful to you, please tell your friends and colleagues so that they could also subscribe to the blog and to the videos. You might also find it useful to subscribe to my locals community or my Substack publications, where for a small fee you can get additional information and blog postings and webinars. Thank you for your attention.